It was well past the scorching midday heat, yet the glare of the July sun bounced hard off the pale concrete surrounding our neighborhood's communal pool. Tucked behind a row of towering poplar trees, that pool had always been a source of pride for the Oakbridge Estates community, a shimmering oasis of summer fun that residents bragged about during backyard cookouts. But on this particular afternoon, the usual laughter and splashing had vanished, replaced by an unsettling silence. Standing at the gated entrance, I found myself eye to eye with Lorraine Bailey, the newly minted pool monitor, and, notoriously, the most feared member of our HOA. A half-smile of smug authority curved at the corner of her lips. "I'm sorry, but he can't come in here with that," Lorraine declared, punctuating her sentence with a stiff jab of her manicured finger. She was indicating my friend Daniel's sleek, ultralight wheelchair. New policy for the safety of all swimmers. No metallic devices on the pool deck that could rust or cause damage. I froze, my mouth half open. Daniel, who had been excited for a simple dip in the water to relieve pressure on his joints, stared dumbfounded. He was used to stares from strangers at times, but never had he faced an outright ban from what was supposed to be a public, community resource. A hush spread among the handful of bystanders who overheard this bizarre pronouncement. My heart hammered in my chest as I tried to swallow my anger. "How can you ban wheelchairs?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. "This is a direct violation." Lorraine cut me off with a curt wave of her hand. "If you want to discuss it, bring it up at the next HOA meeting. But for now, the rule is clear. We must protect our shared property from potential hazards. I'm simply enforcing what the board agreed upon." Her faux pleasant tone and the emphasis on agreed upon made me bristle. While we'd all known Lorraine to be controlling, none of us had expected she'd stoop to something so blatantly discriminatory. If you're wondering how such a ridiculous, heartless rule got passed in a place as seemingly idyllic as Oakbridge Estates, buckle up. The fight that Daniel and I were about to embark on would send shockwaves far beyond the pool gate, and we weren't about to give up easily. Stay with me to hear how this all unfolded, and see how a single misguided ban would spark a conflict that would shake the foundation of our entire HOA. My name is Alicia Freeman. I've lived in Oakbridge Estates for 6 years, since just after my daughter, Jade, was born. My husband, Tom, and I were drawn here by the quiet streets, the proximity to decent schools, and the promise of a friendly, close-knit community. At least, that was the sales pitch. For the most part, it rang true. Neighbors hosted cookouts, kids sold lemonade on corners, and parents exchanged babysitting duties. Our community center boasted a fitness room, a tennis court, and a gleaming pool that served as a social hub during the warmer months. Things started to change when the old HOA board president retired to Florida. A new election was held, bringing in some fresh faces and, as fate would have it, Lorraine Bailey, the self-appointed champion of property values and safety regulations. Lorraine, a 50-something mother of 2 grown children, was sharp-witted and carried a certain social clout. Her husband was a lawyer, rumored to have connections at City Hall. Lorraine was unstoppable in her pursuit of what she believed was perfection for Oakbridge Estates. That pursuit quickly devolved into policing front lawns, mailbox designs, and even the height of rose bushes. Daniel, my friend who uses the wheelchair, had lived 2 blocks away from me growing up before I moved to Oakbridge. We stayed in touch all through college. After a car accident at 21 left him paralyzed from the waist down, Daniel adapted. He learned to navigate the world with equal parts determination and humor. A year ago, he moved to Oakbridge Estates because he found a rare single-story property with wide hallways and an accessible layout that fit his needs. He was excited to settle in, especially with the neighborhood's rumored amenities. Lorraine's first few months on the board were chaotic, but mostly comprised of petty infractions, scolding people for leaving trash cans out too long, complaining if kids drew chalk art on the sidewalks. We'd roll our eyes but comply, hoping not to become her next target. I should have seen the red flags. Daniel mentioned once that Lorraine had curtly suggested he park his car somewhere else if it dripped oil on the driveway. At the time, I brushed it off as typical HOA overreach. Little did I know, it was the start of a more sinister agenda. In early June, I began hearing rumors about a new set of proposed pool safety guidelines. They included things like limiting glass containers and restricting large floats. On the surface, These ideas seemed reasonable. Nobody wanted broken glass near a swimming area, and large inflatable slides or rafts could be hazardous if they blocked the lifeguard's view. But there was one bullet point that raised eyebrows. No metal devices on or near the pool deck that could present a rust or slip hazard. When that snippet circulated in our neighborhood's online forum, a few people asked for clarification. Could we bring metal water bottles? Chairs for the lifeguard stand were metal, too. Would those be banned? The official response was that only certain forms of metal, not integral to the structure of the pool area, might be restricted. The language felt deliberately vague. My friend Megan, who had an aluminum walker, was immediately concerned. She had mild arthritis and used the walker for extra support. She posted on the forum, "Does this mean I can't bring my walker to the pool? That seems discriminatory." Lorraine, posting under the official HOA account, responded with a short, dismissive message. "We will evaluate cases on an individual basis. The board is committed to upholding safety above all else." Alarm bells rang in my head. I remember telling Tom, "This is definitely going to be trouble for Daniel if they interpret it to include wheelchairs." Tom, ever the optimist, shrugged. "They can't possibly be that foolish. It's illegal." I wanted to believe him, but a gnawing sense of dread told me Lorraine would find a way to push her agenda. About a week later, Daniel and I decided to go to the pool for some R&R. He often swam laps in pools. It was an excellent form of exercise for him since it took weight off his lower body. I recall how excited he was to try out the new aquatic wheelchair ramp the HOA had installed a few years back. It was supposed to accommodate wheelchair users with a gentle slope leading to the water. As we approached the pool gate, a teenage lifeguard stopped us. Her cheeks burned red as she struggled to speak. I'm sorry," she said, glancing nervously at Daniel's wheelchair. "I've been told I need to check if you can use that in here." I blinked in confusion. "Use what? The wheelchair? He needs it to get around," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle. This lifeguard was just a kid, probably stuck in the crossfire. She hesitated, flipping through a binder of new policies. Ms. Bailey left a note saying, that certain metal-based mobility devices might cause rust stains on the pool deck. Daniel raised an eyebrow, letting out a slow breath. "This is a new wheelchair," he pointed out. "It's treated for water resistance, designed exactly so I can maneuver around damp surfaces. The frame's aluminum, no rust. This is a standard medical device." Hesitating, the lifeguard gave us a helpless look. "I'm really sorry, but Ms. Bailey said I had to call her if someone tried to bring in a wheelchair. I can't let you pass until I do." My stomach nodded. I felt the heat of the sun intensify as we waited, Daniel's arms resting on the metal rims of his wheels. Eventually, Lorraine arrived. She didn't even address Daniel directly, just turned to me with that saccharine, condescending smile. "I'm sure you understand. We're not banning wheelchairs. We just need to be cautious. You wouldn't want your friend to be liable if his device caused damage, would you?" Her logic was twisted. Rust hazard? Liability? Daniel tried to remain calm. "This is a medical necessity," he said evenly. "You can't seriously be denying me access to a public amenity I pay for through my HOA fees." "Oh, you're not being denied," Lorraine countered swiftly. "We just need time to verify that your wheelchair meets the required specifications. It's a precaution." I wanted to scream. Instead, Daniel and I turned around and left, both furious. That night, I fumed on the phone with my neighbor Ebony, who uses a cane. "Lorraine better watch herself," Ebony said, her tone steely. "She's playing with fire. The ADA is a serious matter." Shortly after that incident, an announcement hit our mailboxes and the Oak Bridge online forum. Effective immediately, wheelchairs, walkers, and other non-pool equipment constructed primarily of metal are temporarily disallowed from the pool area until further notice. This measure is to ensure the longevity of our pool deck surfaces and reduce slip-related incidents. It was signed by the board, although I suspected Lorraine had authored every word. The community erupted. Some people shrugged, unconcerned because they didn't personally need mobility devices. Others, however, were outraged at the blatant discrimination. Ebony, Megan, Daniel, and I led a chorus of complaints, demanding the HOA reverse this ill-conceived rule. We cited the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, which mandates accessibility for public facilities, including those operated by an HOA if they're used by multiple residents. Lorraine responded with a defensive statement. This pool is private property, funded by the collective membership. The ADA does not necessarily override private safety regulations. The board is acting in the best interest of all residents. She included vague references to local codes, but we sensed it was mostly bluster. Tensions soared. A slew of residents threatened to withhold HOA dues until the policy was revoked. Others suggested we skip the pool altogether and join a local fitness club. Daniel, for his part, took a more direct approach. He reached out to a local disability advocacy group, explained the situation, and asked for guidance. The group, outraged, promised to investigate and, if necessary, file an official complaint. Suddenly, Lorraine's personal crusade was on a collision course with a far more powerful entity than a handful of Oakbridge residents. Our community forum, typically a place for yard sale announcements or lost cat alerts, became a digital battlefield. Each day brought new threads. Is the HOA crossing the line? Wheelchair ban, illegal or not? Residents traded barbed comments. Some demanded Lorraine's resignation from the board. Others posted half-baked legal theories to justify the ban. The mood was anxious, combative, and deeply divided. I pored over each post, trying to piece together the motives behind Lorraine's unyielding stance. One thread included screenshots of old messages from her, complaining about unsightly equipment at the pool. Someone had allegedly seen her scold a grandmother for bringing a foldable metal chair to watch her grandkids swim. Over time, it became clear that Lorraine's obsession went beyond rust or safety. She wanted to maintain a pristine, picture-perfect environment, free of anything that disrupted her vision of a luxurious suburban resort. She apparently believed wheelchairs and walkers did not fit the aesthetic. I found myself shaking with anger as I read her barbed responses, in which she portrayed those needing mobility devices as inconsiderate for potentially damaging property. Daniel, reading the forum from home, sent me a text. "We need to fight this, Alicia. Hard." He was right. The local disability advocacy group was drafting a formal complaint to the HOA, citing explicit ADA language about public accommodations. Our pool, while on private HOA property, functioned as a shared community amenity. It was subject to compliance. The complaint demanded an immediate reversal of the ban and threatened further legal action if they refused. Just when I thought we were alone in this fight, an unexpected ally emerged. Harold Green, the Oakbridge Estate's treasurer. He was the kind of man who radiated a quiet kindness, with gentle eyes and a patient smile. Known for his meticulous bookkeeping, Harold rarely engaged in community politics. But the wheelchair ban had apparently stirred something in him. One evening, he reached out to me privately through the forum, asking if we could meet. We chose a local coffee shop. Harold showed up with a stack of documents under one arm and a determined expression. Over 2 cups of coffee, he revealed that he strongly disagreed with Lorraine's ban. His daughter, who lived out of state, used a wheelchair due to a chronic illness. Harold never mentioned it publicly, but it made him acutely aware of the everyday challenges wheelchair users faced. "Lorraine has a way of browbeating the rest of the board into line," he explained, sighing. "She's persuasive, and her husband's a lawyer. People tend to give in, even if they disagree. But this time, she's gone too far." Harold flipped open a folder, displaying copies of receipts, invoices, and emails. "Look," he said, pointing to a set of line items. "We installed that accessible ramp at the pool a few years ago, paid for by a special assessment. The board at the time recognized that the ADA would require us to make the pool accessible. Lorraine wasn't on the board back then. Now she's ignoring these facts, and that's a problem." He confided that she pushed her agenda through quick side meetings with 2 or 3 board members, never holding a proper vote for official record. "It's shady," Harold said. "I don't want the entire HOA to face legal trouble for one person's vendetta." I felt a surge of hope. If Harold, a highly respected board member, was on our side, we had a real chance of overturning the ban. "Could you speak out at the next HOA meeting?" I asked. "We need an authoritative voice." He agreed. We parted ways, determined to bring the truth to light. With Harold's evidence in hand, we aimed to confront Lorraine head-on at the next monthly meeting, set for the following Wednesday. The community center was packed. Rows of plastic chairs overflowed with residents, many standing against the walls. The usual stale coffee and donuts sat untouched on a folding table, overshadowed by the tension swirling through the room. At the front sat the board, 5 members behind a long table, each with a nameplate. Lorraine was in the center, her posture rigid, her eyes narrowed as she scanned the crowd. Harold sat 2 seats to her right, a quiet determination in his gaze. I had never seen such a turnout for an HOA meeting. People were fed up, anxious, and ready for a showdown. Tom stood behind me, resting a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Daniel, seated in his wheelchair at the front row, exuded a calm confidence that belied the storm brewing in the room. Lorraine banged her gavel. We'll begin with old business. But no one was interested in last month's minutes. A voice from the back shouted, "What about the wheelchair ban?" Heads nodded, murmurs spread. Lorraine's lips tightened. "In due time," she replied, flipping through her papers. "We have a set agenda, and I asked that residents remain orderly." But the crowd wasn't having it. Another person chimed in. "We demand an immediate vote on reversing the ban. This is a violation of basic rights." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Lorraine's gaze swept the faces before her. "Fine," she said, clearing her throat. "New business, item 1. Proposed guidelines for pool safety. I'll read them aloud. Please hold your comments until I finish." She proceeded to read the policy statement that effectively banned metallic mobility devices, describing them as potential safety hazards. As she spoke, her tone dripped with a forced formality, as though reading from a legal script. When she finished, the hush in the room hung like a charged static. Harold seized the moment. "Madam Chair," he began, "I have some documentation to share with the community." He lifted a folder. Lorraine's face paled slightly. "This is a record of the accessibility improvements Oakbridge Estates funded in 2019. We installed ramps and handrails to meet ADA standards. Banning wheelchairs now directly contradicts that effort." Lorraine's smile turned icy. "Harold, we discussed this. The board is empowered to create additional rules for safety. ADA doesn't necessarily override private property guidelines." Harold drew a deep breath. "With all due respect, you're mistaken. Our HOA's amenities are open to all paying members, and we do not function as an exclusive club with membership selection. We must comply with ADA standards. Denying wheelchair access is illegal." A murmur of agreement swept the room. Daniel raised his hand. "I'd like to speak." He moved to the aisle, turning to face the board. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I just want the same access everyone else has. I can't stand up and walk. My wheelchair is my legs. If you ban wheelchairs, you're banning me from the pool." The raw honesty in his words caused an instant hush. Even Lorraine looked momentarily unsettled. Then, in a flash, she recovered her composure. "We're not banning you," she insisted. "Just your device. And only temporarily, until we ensure it meets safety requirements." Daniel looked at her steadily. "That's the same as banning me," he said, his voice unwavering. "And we both know it?" After the meeting, the entire community was abuzz. The ban still stood, at least formally, but public opinion had sharply turned against Lorraine. People took to social media with renewed fervor. A local news station's Facebook page caught wind of the controversy, running a short online piece titled, "HOA bans wheelchairs from pool? Residents cry foul." The story quickly gained traction, drawing the attention of disability rights advocates from across the state. Lorraine's reaction was swift. She posted a long statement on the Oakbridge forum, insisting the media had misrepresented the facts. She repeated her rationale: potential rust, slippery surfaces, and the threat of litigation if someone got hurt. But her post was met with a barrage of angry responses. Some labeled her a heartless bureaucrat, others accused her of ableism, and a few demanded she resign immediately. Publicly chastened, Lorraine reached out to her allies on the board, but her support was waning. Only Clara, the HOA secretary, stood by her. The remaining members seemed to sense the legal and moral precariousness of maintaining the ban. Meanwhile, Harold quietly worked behind the scenes, encouraging neighbors to submit formal complaints to the HOA and to local authorities. 2 weeks after that tense HOA meeting, we got word. The disability advocacy group Daniel had contacted filed an official complaint with the Department of Justice, referencing Title III of the ADA. In parallel, they threatened to sue the HOA if immediate changes weren't made. That legal letter landed in the mailbox of every board member. According to Harold, Lorraine's panic was palpable when the letter arrived. She had a habit of insisting she had it under control, but this time, the stakes were too high. A special meeting was called, to be held privately in the board's small conference room. Harold, however, insisted on transparency. He leaked the meeting details to me, Ebony, and a few other concerned residents. We arrived en masse, about 20 of us, determined to gain entry. Lorraine tried to bar us, claiming it was a closed session, but we refused to budge. The tension reached a boiling point, with raised voices echoing down the corridor. Finally, the board reluctantly allowed a few of us inside to observe, Daniel, Ebony, and me among them. In that cramped conference room, the board members looked uneasy. Lorraine sat at the head of the table, scanning printed emails and documents that the advocacy group had sent. She seemed rattled, but clung to her authority. "We can't just cave," she snapped. "If we do, every resident with a piece of metal equipment will come strolling in, claiming special privileges." Harold shook his head, exasperated. "Lorraine, we're not talking about special privileges. We're talking about basic access guaranteed by federal law." Daniel leaned forward, hands folded on the table. "These are people's lives you're messing with. Do you realize how humiliating it is to show up at the pool only to be told you can't enter because you're in a wheelchair?" Lorraine wouldn't meet his gaze. "We're looking out for the interests of the entire community, not just a few individuals." My pulse pounded. "But you're forgetting, Daniel is part of this community, too. He pays HOA dues just like the rest of us. The ban is immoral and illegal." The words came out more forcefully than I'd intended, but I was tired of mincing words. Clara, the secretary, fidgeted. "We can't disregard potential lawsuits from slip-and-fall incidents either. The community might be held liable if the wheelchair leaves water on the deck, someone slips. People come out of the pool soaking wet all the time," Daniel countered. "Are you going to ban swimmers for dripping water next?" An awkward silence settled. Harold, ever the diplomat, proposed a compromise. "Let's vote to rescind the ban immediately, issue an apology, and align our pool regulations with ADA guidelines. That's the only way to avoid a potentially devastating legal battle." All eyes turned to Lorraine. Her knuckles were white as she gripped her pen. She glanced at Clara, who shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I move to table this discussion until we consult legal counsel," Clara ventured. But another board member, Mark, piped in. "I second Harold's motion to rescind. We can't keep this up." Lorraine glared at him. "Mark, you don't understand the bigger picture. We'll be opening a Pandora's box." "I'd rather open that box than invite a DOJ lawsuit," Mark shot back. Despite Harold and Mark's efforts, Lorraine managed to delay a formal vote. She insisted on consulting the HOA's attorney, who happened to be her husband's colleague. Rumors circulated that she was desperately trying to spin the narrative, maybe find legal loopholes to keep her ban alive. In the meantime, the story reached a local news station. A reporter requested interviews with residents. Daniel bravely agreed. Standing outside the pool gate, he explained how the ban had impacted him and others, while the camera captured the locked gate behind him. The clip aired on the evening news, inciting a new wave of public outrage. Commentators blasted the HOA's behavior as a blatant example of discrimination. The next day, Lorraine's face turned up on the neighborhood forum as she posted a news statement. "Oakbridge Estates regrets any confusion regarding its pool safety measures. We are currently reviewing policies to ensure compliance with all applicable guidelines, including but not limited to the ADA." The message was pure PR spin, carefully avoiding the word ban. Nowhere did it say that the ban was lifted. By then, the local disability advocacy group and the Department of Justice had made their stance known. Either Oakbridge Estates would comply immediately or face legal repercussions. With each passing day, Lorraine's control slipped further out of her hands. Yet the board remained hesitant for fear of crossing her or her husband. Harold told me quietly that some board members worried Lorraine would retaliate in ways only she could. A meltdown seemed inevitable. One sweltering afternoon in late July, Ebony texted me, "Get to the pool now. You won't believe this." Rushing over, I found Ebony standing near the entrance, eyes blazing. A middle-aged woman I didn't recognize was wiping tears from her cheeks. Beside her sat her teenage daughter in a pediatric wheelchair, looking both embarrassed and upset. Apparently, Lorraine had confronted them. The teen, Tasha, had recently undergone surgery, and her mother had thought a cool dip would be therapeutic. The second Lorraine spotted the wheelchair, she marched over, brandishing a laminated copy of the pool safety guidelines. She insisted they leave. "It's for your own good," she apparently said. "We can't risk damaging our new deck, which was recently refinished." Hearing this made my blood boil. Ebony and I approached Lorraine, demanding an explanation. She snapped back, "We haven't yet reversed the policy. Until then, these metal devices remain barred from the deck." Tasha's mother looked at us in desperation. "My daughter's been looking forward to a swim all week. She's in pain daily. How can you do this?" People around the pool began to notice. Some leapt to Tasha's defense. Others stood by, stunned. For me, it was the final straw. I whipped out my phone, recording Lorraine as she insisted the mother and daughter leave. Lorraine tried to wave me off, but I kept filming. "Don't you see what you're doing?" I demanded. "You're humiliating them." Lorraine spun around, her eyes wild. "Put that phone down. You have no right." "On the contrary," I spat. "I have every right to document discriminatory behavior." Lorraine's face turned beet red, her composure slipping. She stormed off, presumably to call security or who knows what. But security never came. Instead, half the crowd at the pool demanded Tasha and her mom stay. Some folks even offered to carry Tasha into the water themselves if necessary. Watching Tasha's face transform from despair to fragile hope was a heartbreaking moment. We guided her inside, ignoring Lorraine's furious glares. I helped the teen down the ramp, her mother holding onto her other arm. The small crowd cheered softly, buoying our spirits. It felt like a powerful, spontaneous stand against injustice. The next morning, an emergency HOA meeting was announced. Word spread fast, and the communal hall filled to capacity. Daniel and Tasha's mother were both present, along with Ebony, Harold, and me. Lorraine appeared at the front table, flanked by the rest of the board, a stiff look on her face. The murmur of the crowd quieted as she tapped the microphone. "I'd like to address the misinformation that's been circulating," she began, hands trembling slightly. "The board and I have always prioritized the safety of Oakbridge Estates residents. Recent events have cast our rules in a negative light, suggesting we are discriminatory, which we are not." She paused, swallowing. "However, we have received formal complaints from multiple parties, including a federal commission on disability rights. Given the circumstances, Her voice faltered. She shifted her weight, scanning the crowd of hostile faces. Someone at the back shouted, "Resign." Another voice chimed in, "Lift the ban." Lorraine pressed her lips into a line. "We have decided to rescind the policy regarding wheelchairs and mobility devices with immediate effect," she said, her voice strained. "I'd also like to clarify that the board never intended to ban individuals with disabilities. We were simply taking precautions against potential hazards." A wave of jeers and applause mingled together. People shook their heads, grumbling at the half-baked excuse. Harold leaned in, speaking softly into the mic. "Furthermore, we'd like to publicly apologize to any residents who felt targeted by this policy. Effective immediately, all mobility devices are permitted. We will ensure the pool area is compliant with all federal standards. We welcome input from any disability advocacy groups moving forward." That statement received a roar of approval. Daniel rolled up to the mic. "Thank you," he said simply, tears brimming in his eyes. "I hope no one else has to go through what we did." Lorraine stood off to the side, cheeks flushed. Then, in a sharp twist, Mark, the board member who had supported Harold, cleared his throat. "We also have one more item on the agenda. A motion to remove Ms. Lorraine Bailey from the position of pool committee chair, effective immediately." Gasps erupted. Lorraine's eyes widened. "You can't do that," she hissed. "Under the HOA bylaws, we can," Harold replied calmly. "A majority vote of the board is sufficient. And there's enough evidence to demonstrate this policy was introduced without due process, putting the HOA at risk of legal action." With that, the board members cast their votes in a quick, dramatic fashion. 3 out of 5 voted in favor. Lorraine had effectively been stripped of her position overseeing the pool. Though she remained on the board in some capacity, her power had been severely diminished. The crowd erupted into cheers, while Lorraine, visibly trembling, refused to meet anyone's gaze. In the days that followed, Oakbridge Estates underwent a shift in atmosphere. The dreaded wheelchair ban was officially revoked, and a formal statement of apology was mailed to every resident. The local disability advocacy group acknowledged the change, dropping their pending legal action but warning they'd keep a close eye on future policies. Meanwhile, the Federal Commission on Disability Rights requested a detailed plan from the HOA ensuring ongoing compliance. Residents who once stayed silent began sharing stories of how they or their loved ones needed various mobility aids. Empathy flourished in a community that had prided itself on being friendly, but had overlooked the challenges faced by some of its members. The pool ramp became a proud symbol of inclusion rather than a neglected afterthought. Lorraine mostly receded from the public eye. Rumor had it she was mortified by the negative press, though she never offered a personal apology to Daniel or Tasha's family. Her husband's law firm distanced itself from her fiasco, and she no longer swaggered around, handing out minor infraction notices with smug authority. Though she still had a seat on the board, her influence waned. In future meetings, she rarely spoke unless directly called upon, seemingly aware that her credibility had evaporated. A week after the ban was lifted, a local newspaper published a feature on Oakbridge Estates. The piece highlighted the rapid turnaround from controversy to inclusion, crediting grassroots activism and the advocacy group's swift action. Tasha's mother was interviewed, praising the neighbors who stood up for her daughter. "We never expected so much support," she said, her smile radiant in the accompanying photo. When one voice rises, sometimes the entire choir joins in. The HOA board, minus Lorraine's once dominant influence, formed an accessibility subcommittee. Harold and Mark spearheaded it, urging residents to share input on ways to improve facilities for people with disabilities or mobility challenges. Ideas ranged from installing additional ramps around the community center to offering free water aerobics classes tailored for those needing low-impact exercise. A wave of renewed neighborly spirit seemed to wash over Oakbridge Estates, as if the ban had been the catalyst to address deeper issues of accessibility and empathy. Even Ebony, who rarely swam due to knee problems, found herself joining the subcommittee. "I used to think if it didn't affect me directly, it wasn't my fight," she admitted at one gathering. "But seeing what happened with Daniel and Tasha changed my mind. We're all in this together." The local news station followed up with another short segment, showing kids, adults, and seniors enjoying the newly improved pool deck. Harold demonstrated how the new slip-resistant surface helped address everyone's concerns without excluding those with wheelchairs or walkers. Gone were the days of suspicious glances and heated arguments at the pool entrance. In their place was a sense of community that transcended differences. A few weeks later, on a breezy Saturday morning, Daniel and I arrived at the pool to find it bustling. Kids splashed around in brightly colored floats, parents lounged with paperbacks, and a senior couple ambled along the shallow end with gentle smiles. Tasha sat on the pool's edge, gingerly dipping her feet in the water while chatting with friends. It was a picture of what Oakbridge Estates had always promised to be, an inclusive, welcoming place. Harold approached us, wearing a contented grin. "Feels like a proper community again, doesn't it?" he said, glancing around. "No more nasty notes. No more uneasy stares." Daniel nodded. "It does. I almost forgot what it felt like to come here without bracing for a fight." Harold motioned toward the ramp. "We're considering investing in additional accessibility features, a pool lift, better signage, maybe even adaptive swim classes." My heart swelled with gratitude. "That's fantastic. If you need volunteers, sign me up." As we chatted, I noticed Lorraine off in the distance, sitting stiffly under an umbrella. She wore large sunglasses, a wide-brimmed hat, and held a magazine she didn't seem to be reading. Every so often, her gaze wandered over to us. There was no hostility, only a hint of regret, or perhaps longing for a time before her actions had isolated her from the community she claimed to protect. I couldn't bring myself to feel triumphant about her downfall. Instead, I felt relief. This was how Oakbridge Estates was supposed to be, a place where neighbors could enjoy life's simple pleasures without prejudice, where a wheelchair, walker, or cane was treated like just another means of getting around, and not a threat or inconvenience. Standing at the edge of the pool with Daniel, I kicked off my sandals and let the cool water lap over my toes. He turned his wheels until he was aligned with the shallow ramp, then smoothly rolled into the water, submerging part of his chair. A wave of laughter rolled over him. Freedom at last. That day, we swam, we laughed, and we let the summertime sun warm us from the inside out. Because justice wasn't just a legal outcome or a forced policy reversal. It was the act of reclaiming our shared space for everyone.